Welcome back to another episode of the Chamber Podcast. My name is Rob Johnson. First off, I want to give a big shout out to Grant Lefebvre for taking over hosting duties while I was away. Glad to be back. Grant is an expert professional. He has been doing radio broadcasting for a long time, so it was nice to see him and how he interacted with guests, and Grant just does an amazing job. My guest today knows Grant pretty well. He actually knows everyone in the Speakeasy well. This is his second time on the Chamber Podcast, and quite possibly his 200th time in this building. Jason Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I feel like it's like a home field.
I know it, right? There is no, usually you sit here. That's the only difference. So.
I know. I'm recording an episode tomorrow, so it's
right.
I guess it's going to be deja vu for everybody as I walk in.
No, I love it. That's great. So, Jason, you have a podcast, Coffee and Grit. It is I'll call it a sub-brand under Roar Consulting, which is a company that you founded. So for the listeners, just give a 30-second elevator pitch to what Roar Consulting does. And then I want to dive into our bigger topic today, which is how to make sales more effective in the company.
Yeah, and that's really what the heart of what Roar does is help companies make sales more effective. I was noticing in my career that sales was, I say, so easy, but we make it so hard. And I had so many businesses that were coming up to me because they saw what we were doing from an organization and being successful in asking me. And so it was, what my business does is two things. We consult companies and work with companies fractionally that are scaling their businesses and growing a team. And then I work with solopreneurs, smaller businesses that they have to sell. They started a business, they have purpose, passion, expertise, sales not being one of them.
What do you think is the main problem when it comes to, let's talk about small businesses first. They don't have a huge sales department. They don't have a huge headcount. What do you think is the main problem with them being able to sell?
There's a lot of stigma around what sales is. And I said, sales is so easy, but we make it so hard. If you can read all these books and hear all these things, there's so many gimmicks, so many things that we do to avoid the actual root of it. And it's so easy because it really, if you just ask people questions, and it sounds so stupid when I teach it or when I tell people, or they come to me with some like, what do I do here? And it's like, well, what are these answers? And they don't know. They don't know the answer like 99% of the time because they're afraid to ask that question for one reason or another. Or they feel like they're asking too many questions, or they don't know how to string that communication together to let that person know why they're asking the questions.
Yeah. I find that a lot of people are so nervous because they have a preconceived notion of what sales should be. They think that sales is, it's almost like a sonnet, like a Shakespearean play, like that level of difficulty to go back and forth with somebody. And it's really, really simple. If you can explain your product and talk to people, odds are you can sell it. So long as you make it more about the customer than you make it about yourself.
Well, you look at visionaries of companies that, the people they're just so passionate about whatever it is that they're doing, and they'll go out and they'll grow and they'll sell and they'll build a successful company. And this is where I start working with companies that person's like, I don't want to do the sales anymore. I want a team and but I don't know what I did. I was just, people said yes to me because they had that story and that trust, and you could see their heart and you knew they did a good job. And so somehow they just grew that business. It's like Michael Jordan couldn't teach people how to be Michael Jordan. He had just a different gear, right? And so how do you teach someone how to do that? And so that's a big piece there is how do you then develop that? Yeah.
I've found that when going through difficult concepts for small business owners, it's really helpful to start with things that they shouldn't do. So give me a couple of things that small business owners shouldn't do when they're selling.
Put the money first. Counting the sale in the dollars before you talk to the person. What you should always do first is going into that situation, putting that person first, or that person sitting across from you, and trying to understand what is their goal and what's preventing them and how can you help them.
To give an illustration of that, I had a company recently, they went to another marketing company in town here, and they came in and they were pissed when they sat down. Like they came in, sat down, and they were already angry based on a previous meeting that they had. So he's like, so what do you guys have for me? I said, I don't really have a whole lot for you. I said, I just want to know, like, so tell me, if we're sitting here in a year and you're still working with me, what does success look like for you? And like, he stopped and his whole demeanor changed just like that, because he's like, no one's ever asked me what I want. He's like, it's always about what they want or how much money I'm going to pay them. And I'm like, well, if I don't know what your goals are, how am I supposed to do anything for you if I don't know what you want? And that's where, to you and me, it's really simplistic, right? You put the other person first and everything else is going to fall into place. But for other people, they kind of gamify it and they treat it as though, I got to close these sales, or I got to screw over this many people. And like, it's dishonest. And that's where, if you don't have that integrity and character going into it, you're not going to win anyway.
I just said it, and even you look at the shady tactics and gamifying it and doing different things like that, but there's also just different things. Instead of picking up the phone and calling somebody and asking them the questions you need to ask them because you need to know in order to better serve them, people do things to go and avoid that. They throw out a marketing, we're going to send out some pictures of our whatever product and hope they buy it from there and hope they click, and and we'll send out some reminders by email, and then we'll throw up some social media posts, and all that's great. But it doesn't take the place of just picking up the phone and asking the questions. The client I was working with today, it was like they wanted to lower a price and they wanted to, and I'm asking them like, no, but how do we take more control over selling this particular product? You said you haven't had any success before, and you're going to the client and saying, hey, what do you typically order? Give me a list of that, and then we'll, then you just go ahead and order it. No, we need to ask more questions.
Yeah.
What are they using on a daily basis? We need to figure that out, because we need to control that. Hey, we have this and this, we can set you up. But if I don't know that, if I'm not asking those questions, we're just going to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and hope it sticks.
Is it largely fear?
Largely fear. It's irrational fear. And 99% of people that are in sales that I've worked with across my 20-year career have the same fear, that they're asking too many questions, that they are coming off. They feel like they are coming off stupid because they're asking too many questions. So many really people think that they should have the answer. You talked about the cookie cutter, like so many salespeople that I've worked with would come in and want to know who's the top salesperson. Great. I want to be like that guy. And they listen to him and that person, whatever. And they'd be disappointed because they couldn't replicate that person's skills and attributes. There's, 5% of people that are just natural salespeople that you can't copy and emulate. They're going to break every rule. They're not going to do things the way they're supposed to. And they survive because they're just that good. And then there's the rest of people that, you can still be good at sales, but you have to follow a process. You have to do things that fit into your skill set as opposed to trying to be somebody else.
All right. So when you're starting the sales process with a new business owner, or not even a new business owner, but someone that's new to trying to grow their sales team, what's the first thing that you do for them to help them kickstart that process?
The first thing is I have to dive in and understand what is going on now. There's a big difference between a trainer and somebody that's going to come in and actually fix the problem. And, training is great, but if I just start training on, hey, you do this, 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 and this, they could already be doing those things. And there could be a couple of things they're doing well that we put more emphasis on, right? But then what is jamming up that process? Yeah. And so when I come in with a company, it's important to, one, sit with the visionary and understand what has made sales successful for them, because there's parts in that process that we can capture and create a process for their sales team to understand the sales story, of what's made the company successful, who are top clients, or, what's the sales process? Sales process is just so important. Are they using a CRM? How are they following up with their customers? Where are the gaps that we're losing sales and opportunities?
Yeah. I like that. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And something that I've always liked about your style of coaching and consulting with people and walking them through the process is you've never been a person to say, I can do this from day one, because you don't know what day one looks like until you get there.
Yeah.
Right. Until you do that, we call them pre-production meetings for like marketing, but until you do that sit down where you're like, okay, it's an assessment. Where are we at? You might already have steps 1 through 4 done, which is going to accelerate how fast we're going to move through this. Or you might only have the even numbered steps done. But you've always been very practical in that you don't really know what difference you're going to make, or I should say when that difference is going to be made, until you actually know exactly what's happening within the organization.
Yeah.
And that is an experience thing, because it never You're not the type of person that's come off as, extremely cocky and arrogant with, yes, day one, we're going to make major differences. We're going to make it rain. It's going to be Wolf of Wall Street up in here by day 7. Like that's never been a part of the organization. And I love that.
And I'll say that, I've probably lost sales because of that, but they're not the right sales, because people that want that, I need it fixed right now, they're going to fire me far before, you know what I mean? Because they're not going to have the patience for
Absolutely.
going deep and actually fixing the problem. They want a Band-Aid fix. They want something that's going to be like, right now, let's put a Band-Aid on it and we'll keep moving. And
yeah. Well, that's an important thing for us to talk about for a minute, is finding the right type of client. Because I've often found that if you're the right type of organization, whether you're marketing, whether you're sales, whatever it is, that right client is going to matter, because it's going to almost be a litmus test to how good you are as an organization with the type of clients that you're willing to accept. So if you do have that Band-Aid client who's like, hey, I only want sales, I only want what I want, I don't really want to listen to your opinion, what are you hiring me for?
Absolutely.
What's the point?
Absolutely.
And those are people that you need to avoid. And moreover, if you're a business owner that plays like that, if you invite in consultants into your business and that's how you treat them, you're not going to be in business much longer. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. A new client I'm just onboarding right now, and talking about where are some people strong in their processes. One area that I've identified he's really strong is he knows his customer. And he's like, kind of to your point, either they're my customer or they're not. If they don't want to do business this way, then bye, that maybe you'll need me later on, but this is the way that we do business. And yeah. I think that's so, to have your core values, to have your North Star of what a good customer is, because that's another, when you ask what are things that people do wrong, is again, selling from your pocketbook. As a salesperson, as an entrepreneur, can be so easy to get caught up in selling from your pocketbook, and that we need to make every customer happy, every person happy. You will not make the wrong fits happy, no matter what you do. And so it's good to say we're not a good fit.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that even as I've had to fire clients that weren't a good fit, as painful as that can be sometimes as an entrepreneur, I found that once I've freed up my time, it's crazy, the right fit comes along, or I have another opportunity that opens up that wasn't there because my time was taken by somebody that wasn't a good fit. That was driving me crazy, that I wasn't ever going to get the right results for, because we weren't on the same page of what the right results look like.
Yeah. If there's 2 minutes that someone should listen to in this podcast, it should be what you just said right there, that it's so critical for small businesses to understand the amount of time you're going to waste with bad clients could be spent on other opportunities that are far more fruitful for your business. But I think what happens is, and I've been there, is you're new, you're starting out, money's thin,
yep,
and you're like, I have to do this because if I don't, then I'm going to lose everything. But what you're missing is your opportunity cost. You're spending all of this time over here. What if it was spent elsewhere? Bringing in better prospects, having a better process, having core foundations as a business to be able to judge your clients against.
Yeah.
That's so critical, and it's missed. I missed it when I started, and that's why I ring that gong so loud, because I didn't do that, and I wish I would have. So anytime I can get in the ear of a new business owner, it's like, do that. Don't worry about tracing the bad client to pay your bills. You'll find the right client that'll help you do that, and it'll be a lot less stressful.
I think we talked about it in episode 4 when I was on at length, as I was doing the same thing. And I had 20 years of sales and sales leadership experience where I taught people to do the opposite. I had success in my career, doing the opposite of what I was doing. But then it was all about the money, because all of a sudden now I had to create the business, right? And it's like worrying about, are my bills being paid and these things. So I know we can all get in that trap. And it's like the best analogy to use is when you're trying to date, or you're looking for a significant other, when you're going to that bar with that desperation is a stinky cologne. I think we've established that's Super
Desperation
Troopers.
number 5.
Yeah. It's, like nobody wants that.
Yeah. And you can see it. It's I forget one of the sales guys I work with for one of our clients. He runs their sales division, and he calls it I forget, salesman breath. I forget what he calls it, but it's like desperation. You can just you can see it, sense it, and that's why even from like our company's perspective, like you never want to approach someone like hat in hand, like, oh, we really need this or else. Like what a weird way to go about making a sale.
Yeah,
and people can sense the desperation, and at a certain point it devalues what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was just having a conversation with Kevin Sabaski the other day,
Yeah.
and it was really cool. He was talking about a client that had hired him, and then he went out to this meeting and ended up blowing up to where he could possibly lose the client. But he had the guts to tell them the things that they needed to hear that could possibly not get him paid.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, there's I tell that story because first off, great on you, Kevin. But there's so many people that, especially from a consultant standpoint, the only way you're going to earn that job is if you give them the flat out, this is what I see,
Yeah.
and call them out for the trash, for what you see, and let them know, and this is what you could do. If you just are nice about it and you hold your tongue and you tell them the pig is pretty and all that kind of stuff, they're not going to even give you your money. But you're in a sticky situation. And so
Yeah.
when you have the guts and the fortitude to just say, this is what I see, that's great. Either they're not your customer or they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing too is if you're on that train of, hey, this pig's great, it's gonna work for you, it's super cute. What's gonna happen is down the line, you're gonna get 24 months into that relationship, and they're gonna be like, hey man, that pig is not cute. You told us it was for 2 years. Like, they're gonna have that self-realization moment, and you're gonna be the one to blame because you've co-signed all of those bad decisions. So now you're going to be the scapegoat.
It's like the mom that told their kid they were cute.
Yeah.
Mom.
It's like, oh, you can sing great. And then Simon Cowell eviscerates you on American Idol. Like, yeah, you have a great voice. I love it. I love it. Keep singing. Keep singing. I got these noise canceling headphones. They sound great. Like, but it's the thing. Like, you have to be honest, and it's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. There's no denying that. It's hard to be the person in the room that is the dissenting voice. I feel it still to this day all the time when I go into a room and I'm like, hey guys, you're wrong. And here's why. Here's my opinion. That's what you hired me for. Take it or leave it. But I'm not going to co-sign this decision. I don't think it's right. You can fire me if you want. It's hard.
It is. It's really hard. But it's really hard to continue working with people going in the wrong direction because at the end of the day, it's going to be blamed on you.
That's a great question. What's harder?
What's harder?
Yeah, it's all about finding that right fit. So if someone is listening and they just started, so we've talked about a couple of instances with small businesses. What's the right first step that they can make if they're like, hey, I don't have the capital to hire a coach, I don't have the capital to hire a sales consultant, but I need help getting started? What would you tell them?
First thing is understanding who your clients are. Who are what is your product? What is your service? How are you serving them?
Yeah.
Because once you figure that out, you can kind of reverse engineer. I said questions are the key. If you go in there planning to do a lot of talking about how you have the best products and services, plan on striking out quite a bit. Sometimes you're going to throw it at the wall and somebody just really needs your product and they're going to buy it. But I'm telling you what, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Ask questions. And so figure out who are your people. What is their problem? And maybe you've already had clients that have told you you're the best because of X, Y, Z. Think of that story and, think of where'd you meet that person? What kind of problem did they have? What kind of people are they? What were their challenges? What were their concerns? As you're going through the process and getting to know them, or you start getting to bring them on as a client, what were their concerns that they may have had about your service, or maybe their hesitations, and how did you overcome those? Because those are great things as you think about. I've had clients that I've sat with and asked that question, and there are clients that they've closed that have had the same concerns or same objections that they keep getting beat over the head with that they can't overcome. But they overcame that one. How? And then what were the result of that? Because that helps you overcome the objections later.
That's a really good point. It's okay to simulate those conversations until you feel like you have a handle on them.
I was hoping we were going to talk about this. Yeah.
So role playing. So it's one of those things where, like, if you're doing sales calls, role playing and stuff, it can be uncomfortable at first because you're like, well, this isn't the business owner. This is Tom, and I don't really like Tom that much, and I got to role play with him now, or whatever. But you have to do it in order to be able to clear those objections. And even if you're a solopreneur, you can do it on your own.
Yep.
So if they say this, what do you say?
And here's the elephant in the room. We can talk about role playing all day long, but you've got to get confident and comfortable because 99% of you will not go do this, but it is the night and day difference of whether you're successful or not, whether your people are ready or not. I would have so many salespeople on a daily, weekly basis would text me, oh my God, that role play we did this morning, a customer came in with that same exact scenario that we role played, and I was ready. I was ready to go. It was like I thought you were shopping me, like I thought you were sent them in. And it was like time and time and time again, because when you're ready for it, when we talk about it, all of a sudden you hear it and you're ready to go and you're ready for all the responses going through. What are some objections that we typically get when we ask that question?
Yeah.
How do we overcome that?
Yeah. And the other thing too is, how do you train how to answer those objections with the right tonality, with the right cadence? All of those things are equally important, because you and I can answer a question using the same words.
Yeah.
If we use different tone, someone's going to walk away feeling something completely different.
Let me put this in an analogy that I think most people will get. Think about, I'm excited about the Detroit Lions. I'm so excited about football season coming up.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Man, I've drank the Kool-Aid again. I think this is going to be the year.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm so excited about the Lions. Just think if they met in August and they got a playbook. They said, all right, guys, read the playbook over. These are the standard operating procedures for the rest of the year. Go home and think about it. We'll come back in September and we'll play the first game, see if everybody's ready.
Love it.
Are they ready? No, they're not trained. They're not physically ready. They're not in sync and throwing passes, right? They're going to look very sloppy that first. So why, as a profession, or do we think it's okay to say, hey guys, these are the standard operating procedures. This is how we respond when they say this, and when we, when somebody asks this question, this is how we do, and these are the standard operating procedures. It'll be in the book over there.
Yeah.
Do you think your salespeople are ready? Do you think your team is ready? Are you ready? I think you should. Listen, every single one of your salespeople is going to tell you no. I had one. I was training a few weeks ago, and I was like, "You ready to practice that? You ready to roll? Practice that out?" And she was like, "No, I think I'm good." I'm like, "You're good? You're ready for the first call?" She was like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Great, let's try it then."
Well, let's
demonstrate it.
Yeah.
And her call was horrible.
Of course.
So, hey, and then I role played it with her. Like, you be the customer. And I gave her, it was like, I threw out different questions and I got and she was now writing down stuff. All right, now you give it back to me. Everyone's going to give you pushback. You got to give them the pushback back. Think about it, especially if you have somebody that's in sports or is sports minded, or at least likes that kind of thing. You could use that.
Yeah.
Use that analogy, because we got to practice.
Yeah. I love that. And one thing that probably in the last 2 to 3 years really cemented in me when it came to sales was, you have to be okay walking away from a deal.
Yes.
And this goes back to what you were talking about with making sure that you have the right customer, because I feel like what happens is you get someone who's interested, right? They come in, they do a tour, they sit down, they book a consult with you, like a 30-minute explainer. And then what happens is they sound really interested, and you talk about the price, and now they're sounding least interested. So now you're trying to overcompensate to get them to come back to the table. That's why you have to set up standards.
Yeah.
And if they don't meet those standards, it's okay to walk away, because that means they weren't right for you. But I feel there might be a little bit too much pressure, and this is a generalization, but from a sales manager to a sales associate perspective, there might be a little bit too much pressure on hitting that quota at the risk of accepting clients that aren't going to be a good fit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's quality over quantity all day long, because those customers that are not the right fit are usually the ones that will beat you up the most on price, but they'll take most of your time. And I know we talked about this in our episode when you were on Coffee and Grit, and how you have a annual where you go through and let go of clients that are not right fits. And that's
Absolutely
huge.
Yeah, it's critical, not only to the health of the business, but to the health of the employees as well. They don't want to be managing bad clients either. And from my perspective, I've had clients that I've had to directly communicate with and work with that I haven't enjoyed. And I'm the owner of the company, so I couldn't imagine what it's like from an associate level perspective to have to get up every day and be like, damn, I got to talk to this guy again. Like, that's not a healthy culture that you want to be setting. So it's okay to let them go.
Yep.
You'll feel much better.
You'll feel much better. You said something though that made me think of something, and this is, I think, a simple question that people can add in. That when you're talking to somebody and you're laying out your price or your service, and they make that face, they do that thing that they something happened, right?
Yeah. You can tell there's been a temperature change in the room.
There's been a temperature change, and most of the time we can assume it's price or whatever. In fact, all the time we make the assumptions, and then we start doing our self-defense mechanisms, whether it's talking too much, lowering the price. We do all those things that are like the nervous things that lose the sale, essentially. If you were to slow it down, and some people are afraid to ask us questions, which is why you don't, but if you can slow it down and you see somebody make that face, like, I saw that, what are you thinking?
I love that.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
And stop.
Shut up.
Stare at them.
Yep. I say that. I love it. I love how much we think alike on this, because we do a lot of training where it's not necessarily sales, but it's like client meeting management.
Yeah.
Ask the question. It might be a scary question to ask, but once you ask it, don't hedge against it. Just shut your mouth and let them talk.
Yep.
Because what you're going to do is you're going to ask the hard question, and then you're going to try and talk around it so that way it doesn't sound as bad. You're going to try and soften that blow. Don't do that. It's not worth it.
Yep.
And you just shut up and listen.
What percentage of people do you think you ask that question that answer it?
Well, the hard question?
Yeah.
Where it's probably all of them.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever had, because generally what I'll do is like my common phraseology is if I see something change, I'll be like, hey, I want to back up for a second. So when I had said this is how I saw you respond. Walk me through that for a minute. Then I shut
Powerful.
up. Stop.
Yep.
And they'll be like, well, I wasn't really expecting to spend that much. I really wasn't expecting to do that. And it's like, I'm not expecting to do that either. I'm telling you what this particular service is. We can do less of services. We can bring that down and scale up. There's options, but you seemed uncomfortable, and I wanted to make sure that you weren't, because that's not my goal in any client relationship, is for you to feel uncomfortable.
Yep.
And then that builds so much trust right there, because you're willing to talk about those hard things. It's a game changer.
I talk about being the difference. It's those little things that are difference makers. It's like that. It's just a confidence level that you have with that people are like signaling, this person's going to take care of me differently than anybody else, because nobody ever asked me that. And I my theory is that you get 99.9% of the people that answer your question because nobody's ever asked them that. It's a mental hack. Their brain's not even ready to defend that.
Yeah. They have no pre-built-in defense because it's an area no one has ever touched.
Yeah.
And generally you can tell, like early on when I was doing this, you could tell when a client or a potential client would walk out of the room and then everyone would talk about, man, I wish I would have said this when this happened. That's a sign that you failed. Yep. You should have said it during the meeting. Now when someone walks out, they'll be like, damn, I'm glad we asked that question. Like that changed everything.
Yeah.
Because those are the types of relationships that you need to be able to build, because that's how trust and authority is built in both sides of the relationship dynamic.
Yep. Question. I had this guy this time that told me he couldn't afford my services, and I hadn't even told him a price.
Yeah.
And so I literally asked him, like, how do you know? And he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you said you're going to have to circle back with me in a few months when you could afford my services, but you don't even know the price. How do you know you can't afford them? And how do you know when you've arrived? How do you know when you've hit your goal?
Two very hard questions.
And he, like, we ended up being able to walk it back through, and he signed up for me in a few months, but he would have never have if I wouldn't have, because it would have just been hanging out there. He would have forgot about it. I would have never followed, whatever, just for a different situation. I would have, he would have never taken that action.
Yeah. I don't want to turn this into like a 4-hour podcast, but I feel like we could talk forever. I do want to ask you one more question though, is when it relates to following up, I wonder if you and I have different philosophies on this.
Yeah.
I hardly ever follow up with people, because what I do is, one of my litmus tests in testing a good client is if they're communicative. So what I'll do, and I really want to know if you disagree with me, what I'll do is, so they'll reach out, they might say, hey, I saw this. I reach out and say, hey, great, here's a calendar link. Let's set something up and we'll chat. And they'll be like, great, I'll get right on that. And then I don't hear from them.
Yep.
So in my CRM, I'll ping it for 3 days, circle back, call, email, text, that cycle. If I don't hear back from them, I just let it go.
Yeah.
Because if it's not that important to you, the onboarding is not going to be that important. Meeting with my team at the first time is not going to be that important. getting me the information that I need is not gonna be that important. So like if the beginning of the sale is not that important, and some people will be like, hey man, I was on vacation for 2 weeks, I'm back. Like, great, love it. But I'm not gonna keep pestering you 12 times because my time is valuable, your time is valuable. And if you're gonna tell me you're gonna do something, I'm gonna hold you to it.
It's funny. I agree with that. And I use a very similar process. My calendar link is a big driver in my sales process. I'll teach you how to make cold calls, but I would rather teach you how to book meetings, with good connections, good prospects, So I use my calendar link as a driver. And if you want to book a meeting with me, great. I love the piece of that follow-up because I think that follow-up piece is needed. If you just threw a link and then didn't circle back, it's easy for people to get busy, that kind of thing.
Plus, how do you know to go to spam or,
exactly.
That's why that call, text, and email is important because that kind of mitigates the spam issue.
Yes.
But yeah, I completely agree. Because I know like sometimes in sales, it's like you got to follow up 10 times before you let them go. And then like I forget whose video it was, but it was one of those sales hacks on YouTube that I don't really like. And he was like, you don't stop until you get a cease and desist. It's like, well, just calm down a minute. Like we don't need to go that far, just let the poor guy live. Like he doesn't want what you do.
And you get a cease and desist.
Yeah, I was like, that's a little too far.
Now, so that's the beginning of the process. If I have somebody that we've went through the process in, so I had a particular client, became a mutual client, but that's like 20 follow-ups because they expressed interest. We had meetings. It looked like it was going in the right direction, but it took me continuing to have to follow up. And it was I counted because I remember the stat. It was 20 times before we finally took that leap. And I knew I could help them. I knew the blockage wasn't necessarily that we weren't a good fit. Yeah. I like what you're doing from the disqualification process because we've talked about there's having a right fit client.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important what you said of like, if they're not communicative, if they're not even just like, hey, I got your message, I'm going to circle back next week, that through that process of just working with them as a client, they're going to drop the ball on the other things. And that's the same thing with me. If I have a discovery meeting with a potential new client and they don't show up or they show up late, that's done for me unless there's a really, good reason we talk it through because what's the rest of our relationship going to look like?
Yeah. It's disrespectful if it's not addressed in the beginning, and that's huge. If someone rolls in, 40 minutes late to a meeting, no call, no text, and they're just, very nonchalant about it. We're going to talk about it. That's exactly the first thing we're going to talk about in this meeting. And that can seem rude or, forward, but it's important in establishing that relationship.
You'll never establish a relationship because even if that person hasn't had somebody command their respect, like demand their respect, because I've had people that, as clients that they'd be disrespectful to other people, but I've called them out on their shit. Some people need that.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is like, you don't need to respect me, respect my time.
Yes.
Yeah. Cause you might not know me that well.
Yeah.
So I might not be worthy of your respect, but respect the time that I'm allocating for this, just like I respect yours.
Yep.
And there are there are situations where things get missed, right? Things get dropped, that's completely normal. And you can tell when someone's genuine about that. You can tell when it's just, every day for them and they don't care.
Yep.
So I love it. So Jason, what's going on for you? What's coming up that you're excited about? You got a series coming up, is that right?
Yeah. So I have a series coming up that's along the same lines of what we're talking about, and really, it's just being beat over the head of how do I say this, and here's a good example. We talk about communication is so key. I'd have so many times leaders would come to me and be like, I've got this so-and-so on my team, they're showing up late or they're doing this certain thing. I don't know why they're not taking their job seriously. If they just saw how much potential they had, the potential I saw that they had, then they'd be so much more successful. Like, why don't you tell them that? Have you told them that? Have you had that conversation? No, we just assume it, right? Or from a sales conversation, you sit there and spend so much time trying to word the email. Like the email's got to have the perfect words, or you don't make the call because it's got to have the perfect words. And so many times I sit with people and I ask them, what's your objective of the call? And they tell me this great thing that's just simple. Tell them that.
Yeah.
It's a simple. So what the series is communication to be the difference. And it's whether you're in sales or leadership situations, how to have the courageous conversations and reframing them to where they're impactful, and you're being the difference. You're closing more deals and you're leading people.
I love it. What are the dates?
So the dates are moved into October. So October 5th would be the first one. It's on a Wednesday. The course it's $250. You get 4 group coaching sessions. So it's an hour and a half each time, and you get a framework. But the biggest thing is the role playing. It's going to be literally practicing your real life conversations and situations, the things that the conversations you've been putting on the back burner. And I know as a leader, there's so many times where I needed to have a conversation with somebody, and I'd put it off until it became a big problem.
Yeah, I love it. Well, make sure we keep a link to that in the show notes. Apart
Awesome.
from that, I appreciate you coming on, man. That was a great conversation.
I appreciate it. It was awesome being on.
Hope the listeners loved it. That's like an hour of free coaching you just gave them.
Was it an hour? Man,
It's close
I'm
to
in the
it.
hot
It's
seat. I
close
didn't
to
realize
it,
how long it's been.
No, it was great, but I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Chamber Podcast. You can find more of Jason's information in the show notes. Be sure to check that out. Apart from that, we'll catch you next week. Take care.